After that massive explosion in Beirut and days of relentless protests on the ground, Lebanon's cabinet has resigned. The cabinet's resignation comes after several ministers had quit or expressed their willingness to step down. The Prime Minister Hassan Diab made the announcement that the government had resigned. The massive blast triggered public outrage against the ruling class. Protests have been largely taking place outside the government buildings over the last few days. Demonstrations held over the weekend, in fact, led to clashes. Protesters were met with tear gas and water cannons. Protesters blamed the country's leadership for the disaster, accusing them of corruption and overall neglect. At least 160 people were killed and about 6,000 were injured as per the latest details and the figures. Many remain missing even after a week of that explosion. Lebanon's main port has been destroyed. The blast also caused great financial losses, estimated between $10 to $15 billion. 300,000 people have become homeless. So far, 20 people have been detained, including the head of Lebanon's Customs Department. Dozens of people have been questioned, including 2 former cabinet ministers. Meanwhile, exclusive new documents have revealed that the Lebanese security officials had warned the Prime Minister and the President about the 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stored at Beirut's port just last month. They had warned the leaders as to how this massive stash of chemicals could destroy Beirut if it exploded. Just 2 weeks after this warning, the chemicals exploded in a massive blast, obliterating the port. At least 163 people have lost their lives. Over 6,000 have been injured. A report by the General Directorate of State Security mentions that a letter was sent to the President and the Prime Minister on the 20th of July. That letter, according to a senior security official, summed up the findings of a judicial investigation which concluded that the chemicals needed to be secured immediately. The official who was involved in writing that letter said that he had warned the leaders about the dangers if the explosives were vessel carrying ammonium nitrate docked in Beirut. The port authorities impounded that vessel due to outstanding debts. Then in May 2014, the ship was deemed unseaworthy and its cargo was unloaded and warehoused in the ill-fated Hangar 12. This exclusive set of documents could fuel further criticism and public fury. The explosion is an example of the government's negligence and corruption that has already pushed Lebanon to economic collapse. Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab announced his government's resignation yesterday after that massive public outrage and the angry street demonstrations. A number of customs and port officials have also been detained in the last week. And with that, Lebanon has entered a period of political instability and economic ruin, to say the least. With a caretaker government at the helm, how effectively will the country be able to handle the aftermath of a disaster? And looking ahead, what does the path to normalcy look like for the country? The caretaker government will be fulfilling basic duties, including the day-to-day running of the government. Meanwhile, the president will have the difficult task ahead of appointing Hassan Diab's successor. Going by history, this caretaker government is likely to remain in charge for a long time. The new minister will have a tight rope to walk. They will have to balance the demand for reforms and retain the support of both the political elite and the Hezbollah. And once a new cabinet is named, the parliament will have to approve it, after which the caretaker government will be dissolved. But there is no guarantee that a new government will placate the protesters. They are demanding lasting reforms and a complete overhaul of Lebanon's political system. This means an end to the power wielded by the warlords and a complete crackdown on corruption. Some protesters feel that Hassan Diab's government has shied away from a challenge. This spell of political instability could not have come at a worse time for the country. The bailout talks with the International Monetary Fund will now be delayed until a new government is sworn in. The country's GDP is expected to shrink almost 25% this financial year. Without a bailout package, the economic situation is likely to worsen. As for the humanitarian aid being sent by the other countries, it will continue to be managed by the caretaker government. Financial assistance continues to pour in for Lebanon as the country looks to rebuild its explosion-hit capital. Brazil is sending its first humanitarian aid package to Beirut on board a military cargo aircraft. The package includes 5.5 tons of medicines and food packets. The President, Jair Bolsonaro, announced that 4,000 tons of rice would also be sent to Lebanon. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, called for robust international assistance and thanked the world leaders for coming to Lebanon's aid. At the same time, he asked the political leaders in Beirut to implement urgent reforms. Britain's HMS relief materials for over 500 people has arrived at the port of Beirut. The HMS Enterprise is a multi-role survey vessel specializing in rebuilding and was sent specifically to help rebuild the port of Beirut. Meanwhile, a special team from Germany is visiting the worst affected locations in Beirut to take stock of the structural damage caused to the buildings. Initially, about 50 German volunteers were dispatched to Beirut as a rapid deployment rescue and search unit to help search for the victims. And India's envoy to the United Nations, C.S. Tirumurti, expressed condolences to the people of Lebanon in the aftermath of last week's explosion. He informed the UN Humanitarian Affairs body that India will be sending relief material, including medicines, food packets, and other essential items to Lebanon. Take a listen in.
I would like to convey our deep condolences to the people and the government of Lebanon on this terrible human tragedy. We are shocked by the loss of human lives and the widespread destruction. Having paid an official visit to the beautiful city of Beirut last year, it is difficult for me to imagine that this vibrant city has been affected by the blast. I admire the resilience of the people and the dedication of the rescue workers to cope with this tragedy. As a country with which India has had traditionally close and historical relations, including through our peacekeepers in UNIFIL, I would like to express our solidarity with Lebanon at this juncture. India has just recently sent Lebanon essential medical items to combat COVID-19. We are immediately sending more relief and humanitarian material of medicines, foodstuff, and other essential items to do whatever we can to alleviate the difficulties on the ground. We are in discussion with the government of Lebanon on how we can contribute further and provide additional support.